The marketplace was alive with sound and movement. Stalls stretched from one end of the street to the other, filled with colorful fruits, glowing crystals, and strange alien fabrics. Traders shouted to call customers. Children ran between the legs of adults, and the smell of spices mixed with smoke filled the air. Yet in the middle of this lively place, one small figure lay almost hidden in the dust. It was a child, an alien girl with pale skin and deep, glowing eyes. Her legs were twisted, weak and useless, dragging behind her as she crawled slowly across the ground. The dirt clung to her hair, and her thin arms shook every time she pulled herself forward. No one stopped to help her. Most of them did not even look at her. Some looked away on purpose, as if her existence was shameful. The child reached out a trembling hand toward a stall where sweet bread was being sold. She whispered, almost too quietly to hear, "Please, just one piece." Her voice was cracked from thirst. The merchant behind the stall frowned and waved her away like a fly. "Go, do not touch my food. You will curse my goods." The words struck like a whip, and the child pulled back quickly, hiding her hand under her chest. People passed her, their steps heavy in the dust, their shadows falling over her small body. Some of them laughed when they saw her trying to crawl. Others muttered, "She should not be here. Let her die. It is better that way." Every word cut into her, but she did not cry. Tears had long dried from her eyes. All she had now was silence, hunger, and dust. The sun was strong above the market, pressing heat down on her back. Her weak body shook, and sweat mixed with dirt on her skin. She dragged herself toward a shady corner, hoping to rest. Every move was painful, yet she kept going. The ground was rough, filled with stones that scraped her hands. Her thin legs left trails in the dust. For a moment she paused. Around her, voices rose and fell like a wave. No one cared about the little crippled child. She was invisible in the middle of the crowd. Her stomach twisted with hunger, and her throat felt like fire. Still she whispered to herself, "I cannot stop. I must try. Maybe someone will see me." Her voice was so soft that even she could barely hear it. A group of alien children ran past, chasing one another with laughter. One of them kicked dust into her face on purpose. She coughed, blinking her glowing eyes, but said nothing. They laughed at her, pointing at her twisted legs. "Look at her. She crawls like an insect," one shouted. The sound of their laughter followed them as they ran away. The girl lowered her head to the ground. For a moment she thought of sleeping there, letting the noise and dust swallow her. But something deep inside told her to move again. She reached for a piece of cloth dropped from a stall. It was dirty and torn, but she clutched it as if it were treasure. Maybe it could keep her warm at night. The crowd kept moving around her, ignoring the small figure. The merchants counted their coins. Shoppers argued about prices. Guards walked with pride, holding long weapons. And in the middle of it all, the crippled child crawled slowly forward, unseen and unwanted. A shadow passed over her. She froze, afraid it was another cruel voice or a foot ready to kick her aside. But the shadow moved on, and she breathed again. Still, she felt a strange sense in the air, as if someone's eyes were watching her closely. She dragged herself a little further, her arms aching, her breath shallow. She thought she saw someone at the edge of the market, standing still while others walked. For a brief moment, her glowing eyes lifted with hope, but when she blinked, the figure seemed gone, lost among the crowd. Her chest ached with disappointment. Maybe it was only her imagination. Maybe no one would ever see her. She pressed her forehead to the ground, whispering softly, "I am still here. Please, someone, see me." The market noise swallowed her words. Yet far away, hidden among the moving crowd, a pair of human eyes had indeed seen her. The marketplace grew louder as the sun climbed higher in the sky. More voices, more noise, more colors, and yet, in all that life, the crippled child remained nothing more than a shadow crawling in the dust. She dragged herself forward again, her weak arms trembling as she tried to approach another food stall. The stall was filled with steaming bowls of broth, their smell rich and heavy. The child's stomach twisted painfully. She stretched out her hand once more, her voice breaking. "Please. Only a little. Just one bowl." The merchant looked down at her, his face twisting with disgust. He did not see a hungry child, he saw something less. "Go away," he barked, pushing her hand aside with the flat of a wooden spoon. The hot broth spilled over the edge of the bowl, and a drop burned her skin. She winced but said nothing. The merchant wiped his hands and muttered, "If you stay near my stall, no one will buy from me. Crawl somewhere else." The child backed away, her hand still stinging from the heat. Around her, people laughed as if it were a joke. "Look at her, begging again. She has no shame," someone said. Another voice added, "She will never walk. Why should anyone waste food on her?" Their words fell like stones, heavy and sharp. She lowered her head, but her glowing eyes still searched the crowd. She hoped to find just one kind face, one person willing to listen. But all she saw were eyes that looked through her as if she were not there. 2 alien guards walked past, their tall frames wrapped in armor. One of them spotted her and sneered. "Still crawling? I thought we told you not to return to this market." He kicked a small stone toward her, watching it strike her weak legs. The other guard laughed and said, "Leave her. Even the dust has more value." The sound of their boots faded, leaving only silence around her. The girl swallowed hard, forcing her body to move again. She crawled toward a group of shoppers carrying baskets of fruit. Her hand brushed the edge of one basket, and a ripe fruit rolled onto the ground. She reached for it quickly, her heart beating fast. But before her fingers touched it, the owner slapped her hand away. "Thief!" the alien woman cried out, pulling her basket close. "Do not touch what is not yours. Your kind spreads curses. You will bring sickness." Others turned to look, and some spat on the ground near the child. She froze, terrified that the guards might return if they thought she was stealing. Her body shook, and she whispered, I only wanted," but no one listened. The crowd had already turned away. The dust was thick now, sticking to her lips and her hair. Her hands were raw from dragging across the stone ground. Each breath felt like a struggle. Still, she pushed herself forward, whispering under her breath, "I cannot stop." Not yet. As she moved, she felt the stares of others piercing into her back. Whispers followed her wherever she crawled. "She is cursed. Her parents abandoned her. She should not be alive." None of them knew her story, yet all of them judged her. Near the center of the market, a group of alien children were playing with a ball made of cloth and rope. They spotted her and stopped their game. One of them grinned wickedly and rolled the ball toward her. When it reached her hands, she looked up in surprise. A small spark of hope lit her eyes. Maybe they wanted to play with her. But before she could smile, one of the boys snatched the ball back and threw a fistful of dust into her face. The group burst into laughter, clapping their hands. "Crawl faster, insect," they shouted. She coughed, wiping her glowing eyes with dirty hands, but said nothing. Her silence only made their laughter louder. Finally, they grew bored and ran away, leaving her choking in the dust. The child curled into herself for a moment, hiding her face in her arms. The voices, the laughter, the insults, they all pressed down on her like heavy chains. For the first time in a long while, she felt her strength slipping. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was worthless, yet deep in her heart a small flame still burned. She thought of nights under the stars when she whispered to herself that life must hold something more than pain. She thought of mornings when she told her weak body to keep crawling. Even when there was nowhere to go, that flame, though small, refused to die. And as she lifted her head again, covered in dirt and bruises, she saw something strange. Among the moving crowd, there was one figure that did not walk away. A figure that did not laugh or spit. Someone was standing still, watching her. The human's eyes met hers across the market. For the first time that day, the crippled child felt truly seen. The crowd continued its noisy rhythm, voices rising and falling like waves, but one man stood still. He was a stranger in this market, a human among aliens. His clothes carried dust from long travel, and a hood shadowed part of his face. Unlike the others, he did not rush to buy food or bargain for goods. His gaze remained fixed on the fragile figure crawling in the dust. For several moments, he simply watched. He saw the way the child dragged her twisted legs behind her, the way her thin arms trembled with every movement. He noticed the bruise on her hand where the merchant had struck her, and the smear of broth that had burned her skin. Most of all, he saw her glowing eyes, eyes that held pain far beyond her small years. The human's jaw tightened. Around him, the marketplace buzzed with laughter and cruelty. He had heard every insult thrown at the girl, cursed. Worthless insect. Each word carried poison, yet she endured them all in silence. He could not understand how an entire crowd could look at a child and see nothing but shame. He shifted slightly, his hand brushing against the strap of the satchel slung over his shoulder. Inside it, he carried supplies from his journey, water, dried food, a few coins. It would be nothing for him to share a little. Yet he hesitated. He was an outsider here. The aliens already looked at humans with suspicion. If he stepped forward now, the whole crowd might turn against him. Still, his eyes returned to the girl. She had stopped crawling for a moment. Her small body curled against the side of a stall. Her lips moved faintly, whispering words he could not hear. But he understood without sound. She was praying for someone to notice her. The human's chest ached. Memories stirred. Memories of another child long ago left behind in dust and hunger. He had not been able to save that one. But maybe fate was giving him another chance now. He watched as a group of alien boys mocked her again, tossing stones near her legs. She flinched but did not cry out. The laughter of the boys rang out cruel and sharp. The human's hand clenched into a fist at his side. It would take only a few steps to reach her, only a moment to shield her from them. But if he acted too soon, the guards would interfere, and the girl might suffer even more. So he waited, his gaze steady, his presence hidden in plain sight. He studied the pattern of the crowd, the movement of the guards, the places where shadows offered cover. He was not simply watching, he was planning. The child tried once more to reach a fruit that had fallen near a basket. Again her hand was slapped away, and again the whispers spread. The human's heart pounded harder. He had traveled across planets, seen many cultures, witnessed both kindness and cruelty, but never something that cut him as deeply as this sight. An entire world ignoring the suffering of a broken child. For a brief moment, his eyes closed. He breathed slowly, steadying himself. He knew the choice he was about to make would not be small. To step forward meant challenging the unspoken law of this marketplace. It meant drawing attention, maybe even hostility. But to remain still meant betraying his own soul. When he opened his eyes again, his decision was clear. The child, unaware of him, dragged herself forward once more. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her glowing eyes dull from hunger. She reached out a hand toward the dust, not for food this time, but simply for balance. And in that fragile motion, the human saw everything. Her will to survive, her quiet strength, her refusal to give up despite the cruelty around her. He took one step forward. The crowd was too busy to notice him at first. Traders shouted. Buyers argued. Children ran. But the human's steps were steady, purposeful, each one bringing him closer to the small figure in the dust. The girl sensed movement near her. She lifted her head slowly, expecting another cruel face or another stone. Instead, her glowing eyes met his. For the first time that day, her gaze did not meet mockery. It met warmth. The human lowered his hood, letting the light reveal his face. His eyes were calm, filled not with pity but with quiet strength. The girl froze, unable to believe it. No one had ever looked at her like that before. For a long moment, they simply stared at one another. The noise of the market faded into the background. Around them, life continued, but between them, time seemed to stop. The girl's lips trembled. "Why, are you looking at me?" she whispered, her voice thin and broken. The human knelt slowly, lowering himself to her level. His answer was soft, almost lost in the noise of the market. "Because I see you." The child blinked in confusion, still crouched in the dust. She could not remember the last time anyone had spoken to her with gentleness. Most voices she heard were sharp, angry, or mocking. But this man's words, "because I see you," felt different. They were quiet, almost fragile, yet filled with a weight that sank deep into her heart. The human slowly reached into his satchel. His movements were steady, careful, as though he feared that any sudden motion might frighten her. From the bag, he pulled out a small flask of water. The flask was scratched from long journeys, but inside it was clear, clean water, something the child had not tasted in days. He uncorked it and held it out toward her. "Drink," he said softly. The girl stared at the flask as if it were a dream. Her cracked lips trembled. She wanted it desperately, but she hesitated. Too many times before, someone had offered her something only to snatch it away with laughter. Was this another cruel trick? The human waited patiently, not forcing her. His hand stayed steady, his eyes calm. Finally trembling, the child reached out. Her thin fingers brushed the flask, and when she realized he did not pull it back, she clutched it tightly. She raised it to her lips and drank greedily. The water was cool and sweet, washing away the burning in her throat. For a moment she closed her glowing eyes, almost forgetting the dust and pain around her. When she stopped, gasping for air, she looked at him again. Her voice was faint. Why are you helping me?" The human studied her for a moment before answering. "Because no one else will." His words were simple, yet they carried a truth that broke through the noise of the market. Around them, the crowd began to notice. Whispers spread like fire. Look at that human touching her. He gives her water? Does he not know she is cursed? The merchants scowled and the shoppers shook their heads. Some laughed in disbelief. No one had ever shown kindness to the crippled child, and to see a foreigner do it felt like an insult to their pride. But the human ignored them. He reached again into his satchel and brought out a small piece of bread. It was rough and dry, the kind of travel food that lasted for weeks, but to the starving child it looked like gold. He broke it gently into pieces and placed one in her hand. Eat slowly, he warned, or it will hurt your stomach. Her eyes widened. She had forgotten what kindness looked like, forgotten what it felt like to be given something without cruelty. She nibbled at the bread, her weak body shaking with relief. Every bite gave her a spark of strength, and tears she thought had long died began to fill her eyes again. The human reached out his hand, brushing the dust gently from her hair. The touch was light, but it carried warmth she had never known. For the first time, the child allowed herself to believe, just a little, that she was not invisible. The marketplace, however, was not silent. Voices rose angry now. "Stop this nonsense!" shouted one merchant. "That child brings ruin. Do not touch her!" Others muttered, "Humans are fools. They do not understand." The human looked up at them, his gaze calm but sharp. His voice carried enough strength to silence some of the whispers. "If you cannot show kindness to a child, then what are you?" His words hung in the air like a challenge. None dared answer. The girl clutched the piece of bread to her chest, staring at him as though he were something unreal. For years she had been trampled, ignored, and cursed. Yet here was a stranger from another world, kneeling in the dust beside her, feeding her with his own hands. It was more than kindness, it was defiance against everyone who had turned their backs on her. Her lips trembled again. She whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Thank you." The human smiled faintly, a rare softness in his hardened face. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You only need to live," but the crowd was not done. Alien guards pushed through, their heavy boots thudding against the stones. Their eyes narrowed when they saw the scene. "Human," one of them barked. "Leave that creature. She is forbidden in this market. You insult our laws by touching her." The human did not move. He stayed kneeling, one arm shielding the child. His voice was calm but unyielding. "She is not a creature. She is a child." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Never before had anyone dared to speak such words. The guards exchanged glances, their hands tightening on their weapons. The tension in the air grew heavy, as if the very stones beneath them waited for a fight. The child, still holding the bread, pressed herself closer to the human's side. For the first time in her life, she felt a shield around her, not of walls or guards, but of courage. She did not understand why this stranger risked so much for her, but in her heart she felt something new rising. Hope. The marketplace had become a battlefield of silence and stares, and in the center of it stood one human, holding the smallest act of kindness like a weapon against an entire world's cruelty. The market, once filled with ordinary noise, traders shouting, coins clinking, children running, had gone strangely silent. All eyes were fixed on the human kneeling in the dust beside the crippled child. Whispers had grown into shouts and shouts into anger. Now the crowd demanded answers. The two alien guards stepped forward, their boots cracking against the stones. Their armor shimmered under the sun, and their sharp weapons reflected the light. The taller guard pointed his spear toward the child. "Human, move away. That thing does not belong here. It is forbidden for good reason." The human's shoulders tightened, but he did not stand. He kept one arm protectively around the girl. His voice was calm but steady. "She is a child, and children belong everywhere life does." The words cut through the air like steel. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some hissed in anger, others shook their heads in disbelief. The guard's eyes narrowed. "You dare question our law?" The second one growled. "That cripple is cursed. She brings sickness and misfortune. Leave her or we will throw you out with her." The child's small fingers clutched the human's sleeve. Her glowing eyes were wide with fear. She had seen this scene many times before. Guards driving her away, merchants shouting at her, people spitting at her. But never before had someone stayed at her side. She whispered, barely audible, "Please, don't." The human glanced down at her, then looked back at the guards. He rose slowly to his feet. pulling the girl gently into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, her thin body light as a feather, but holding her felt heavier than any burden he had carried, for in that moment he carried not only her body, but her dignity. The taller guard took a step closer, raising his weapon. "This is your last warning, human. Put her down, walk away. Do not bring dishonor to yourself." The human's voice hardened, though it never rose. "Dishonor comes not from helping the weak. Dishonor comes from ignoring them." The crowd stirred uneasily. Some muttered angrily, but a few shifted with discomfort as if his words had touched something deep inside them. Still, no one dared step forward. They were bound by fear of their own society's cruelty. The shorter guard sneered. "You speak like a fool. This child has no value. Her twisted legs cannot work. Her body cannot fight. Her life is a waste of food and water." The human's jaw clenched. He pulled the child closer to his chest, his eyes blazing. "Her life is not yours to measure. You look at her legs and call her worthless. I look at her eyes and see a spirit stronger than any of you." For the first time, the marketplace fell completely silent. Even the merchants, usually loud and restless, froze. Every word echoed across the stone walls, impossible to ignore. The human stood tall, defiant, carrying the girl as though she were a treasure instead of a burden. The taller guard snarled and jabbed his spear forward, not to kill, but to intimidate. The point stopped just inches from the human's chest. "You shame yourself, outsider. You shame your kind. Walk away while you still can." But the human did not flinch. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and unshakable. "If you want her back in the dust, you'll have to put me there first." The girl buried her face against him, trembling. Yet for the first time, she felt the trembling was not her own. It was the world's. The crowd, the guards, the very air seemed to shiver under the weight of his words. The second guard hesitated. He had expected fear, begging, or retreat. But instead this human stood tall, unyielding, a wall of flesh and spirit that no insult or threat could pierce. For a moment even he felt uncertain. The taller guard barked again, louder, trying to crush that hesitation. "Do not test our patience!" But the human only stepped back, keeping the girl in his arms. His eyes swept the crowd, meeting their stares one by one. "How many of you have walked past her?" he asked, his voice steady. "How many laughed when she begged? How many of you called her worthless but never once looked into her eyes? You fear her because she is weak, but the truth is you fear yourselves because you are the ones who abandoned her." The words struck deeper than any blade. Some in the crowd lowered their gazes, ashamed. Others bristled, their pride wounded. The guards shifted uneasily. The human's defiance was no longer just against them. It was against the whole marketplace, against their way of life. The child lifted her head slowly, her glowing eyes shimmering with tears. For the first time, she saw the crowd look away, not from disgust but from guilt. And in that moment, a spark of hope lit inside her. The taller guard growled, his pride stung. "Enough! You will regret this, human." He lowered his weapon slightly, but his eyes promised trouble. "Take her if you want. But know this. You have made enemies today." The human did not answer. He turned, his arms secure around the girl, and walked steadily through the stunned crowd. The whispers followed him, but no one stopped him. The people parted before him, leaving a clear path through the marketplace. Each step felt like defiance. Each step felt like a promise. The child clung to him, her heart pounding. For the first time in her life, she was not crawling through dust. She was being carried, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life was worth more than the world had told her. The human walked slowly through the crowded market. The crippled child held firmly against his chest. Each step was heavy with tension, every gaze pressing down on him like a storm. The crowd parted as he moved, some spitting words of hate, others whispering in awe, yet no one dared to block his path. The guards followed close behind, their weapons still raised. Their pride burned hotter than the sun above, and their voices cut through the silence. "Stop where you are," one barked. "You will not leave with her." But the human did not stop. His jaw was set, his eyes forward, and his stride unbroken. The girl trembled in his arms, but she felt the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. It was strong, unshaken, like a drum leading her out of despair. The taller guard rushed ahead, slamming the shaft of his spear into the dirt before the human's feet. Dust sprayed into the air. "No further, outsider," he growled. "You insult our law. You defy our order. Put her down, or you will suffer the price." The human halted at last. His boots pressed into the dust, but his grip on the girl did not loosen. He looked first at the spear, then at the guard, and finally at the crowd gathered around them. The silence was deep enough to hear the wind rustling the banners above the stalls. Then, with a voice calm yet sharp enough to cut stone, he spoke. "I will not put her down." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The shorter guard stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. "You dare defy us?" The human turned his gaze on him, steady and fearless. "I dare to do what none of you had the courage to. I dare to see her not as a curse but as a child. And if you call that defiance, then yes, I defy you." His words carried across the marketplace like a hammer striking an anvil. Some in the crowd shrank back, ashamed. Others muttered angrily, clinging to their old beliefs. But no one could deny the fire in his voice. The taller guard snarled and shoved his spear closer, its point gleaming just inches from the child's face. The girl whimpered, pressing herself tighter into the human's chest. The human's arm tightened protectively around her, his other hand rising to push the spear away. "Enough," he said firmly, his eyes locked on the guards. "Threatening a starving child does not make you strong. It makes you cowards," the insult stung. The guard's face darkened with fury, and for a moment it seemed blood would spill on the stones. But the human's eyes did not waver. He stood like a mountain, unmoved by storm or threat. The shorter guard laughed bitterly, trying to break the tension. "You think yourself a hero? You think your defiance changes anything? When you leave this market, she will still be crippled. She will still be worthless." The human's lips curved into the faintest smile, though it carried no joy. "Worthless?" he repeated. Then he lowered his head to the girl, whispering so that all could hear. "You are not worthless. You are more precious than all their gold and jewels combined. Don't ever believe their lies." The girl's glowing eyes widened. No one had ever spoken such words to her. For the first time, she felt as though her heart truly beat, not with fear, but with life. Tears welled and spilled silently onto his cloak. The human lifted his gaze again, sweeping it across the market. His voice rose, louder now, commanding the attention of every soul present. "You have built your world on cruelty," he said. "You cast out the weak, mock the broken, and leave children to die in the dust. And you call this strength? No, it is weakness. True strength is not in crushing the helpless, it is in lifting them." The crowd shifted uneasily. The truth in his words cut through their pride, leaving them exposed. Some lowered their eyes, unable to meet his gaze. A mother pulled her child closer, guilt flickering in her face. But others clenched their fists, unwilling to change. The taller guard raised his spear higher, his voice trembling with rage. "One more word, and you will not leave this market alive." The human stepped forward, pushing the spear aside with his free hand. His voice was iron. "Then strike me in front of them all. Kill a man who carries nothing but a starving child. Show them what your so-called strength really is." The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. The guard froze, his weapon trembling. The weight of the crowd's eyes pressed down on him. To strike would prove the human's words true, that they were nothing but bullies, cowards cloaked in power. Slowly, the spear lowered. The human's defiance had broken something greater than laws. It had broken fear. The marketplace remained hushed as he turned away, the child still in his arms. He walked with steady steps, each one echoing like thunder through the silence. The crowd parted once more, but this time it was not just out of fear, it was out of respect or perhaps shame. The girl clung tightly to him, her tears soaking his cloak. Yet her lips curled into the faintest smile. For the first time in her life, she was not alone. For the first time, she believed that someone would fight for her. And as they left the heart of the market, the human whispered softly to her, "No matter what they say, you are mine to protect now. No one will put you in the dust again." The marketplace faded behind them, its noise swallowed by distance. Still, the whispers of the crowd seemed to echo in the girl's mind. Cursed. Worthless insect. For so long, those words had chained her spirit. But now, as she lay in the human's arms, another voice replaced them. His voice. Calm, steady, unshakable. "You are not worthless." The child clung to him, afraid that if she let go, he might vanish like a dream. She had been carried only in her earliest memories, and those arms had left her long ago. To feel strength around her now, warmth holding her, instead of pushing her away, was almost too much to believe. They moved through narrow alleys beyond the market. Where the air was cooler and the stones quieter, the human walked with purpose, his eyes scanning every shadow. He knew the guards might follow, their pride demanding revenge. But he also knew something greater. He could not turn back now. The girl lifted her head weakly. "Why?" she whispered, her glowing eyes searching his face. "Why do you carry me?" He looked down at her, and though his features were stern, his voice was gentle. "Because no one else did, and because you deserve more than dust." Her lips trembled, but this time the tears that fell were not only of pain. They carried something unfamiliar, something she had longed for without knowing its name. Hope. The human found a quiet spot near the edge of the settlement, beneath a canopy of old wooden beams. He lowered her carefully onto a flat stone and sat beside her. From his satchel, he pulled out another piece of bread and a small pouch of dried fruit. He placed them in her hands. She stared at them as though they were treasure stolen from the stars. Her voice cracked. "All this meant for me?" "For you," he said simply. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, her body regaining the smallest spark of energy. The human watched her closely, his mind weighing heavy thoughts. He knew this world would not change overnight. He knew the guards would not forget the humiliation, nor would the merchants forget his defiance. But none of that mattered now. He had chosen his path. The child finished eating and leaned back against him, her frail frame pressing into his side. "No one has ever—" she began, but her words broke. She tried again. "No one has ever stayed. They all left me." The human's arm wrapped gently around her. "Then remember this. I will not leave." She looked up at him, searching for any sign of doubt, any shadow of false promise. But his eyes were steady, as if carved from stone. For the first time in her life, she believed. As dusk fell, the marketplace behind them came alive again with noise. But its cruelty could no longer reach her. The human had carried her beyond it, into a silence that felt almost sacred. Above, the first stars began to appear, shining faintly in the darkening sky. The girl's glowing eyes reflected them, brighter now than they had been in years. She whispered, "Will they come for us?" The human did not lie. Yes, they might, her breath caught in fear. "Then why risk it?" He lifted his gaze to the stars. "Because sometimes one life is worth all the risk in the world." The word settled deep into her heart. For so long she had believed she was a burden, a curse, something less than nothing. But this human had given her new names. Child, precious, worth saving. Names that reshaped her very soul. She leaned against him, exhaustion pulling her toward sleep. Yet as her eyes closed, her lips formed soft words she had never dared speak before. "Thank you for seeing me." The human's hand rested lightly on her head. He said nothing, but his silence carried a promise stronger than any oath. As night wrapped the settlement in its cloak, the two figures sat together, the broken child and the defiant stranger. To the world they were nothing. To each other they were everything, and though the future remained uncertain, whether the guards would return, whether the crowd would seek revenge, one truth had already been written in the dust of the marketplace. Kindness had defied cruelty, and hope had risen where none had lived before. This was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning.